Hi, everyone. I'm back. Another conversation with B. I'm always excited about my talks. And today we are talking more about business, entrepreneurship, and innovation. I'm here with Mr. Kevin Ketels, who is the head of entrepreneurship and innovation programs at the Mike Ilitch School of Business over at Wayne State. Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Good. I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
Well, I wanted to chat with you because I've obviously been so impressed with what Wayne State's been doing since I've been home. You've been with the school for quite some time, and it's so impressive to see how you've taken, I also stalk Kevin on the socials, how you've taken this program and given global experiences to these students. So I'd like for you to, before we start, like talk about your role within that program at the School of Business and also how you think it's changed over the years. Let's start there before we go into some more of the nitty-gritty with your background and the future stuff that you're working on.
So I lead the entrepreneurship and innovation program at the business school. I'm also associate professor teaching in global supply chain management, but I teach supply chain and I teach entrepreneurship because that's my background, my entrepreneurial background. And I lead a study abroad as well for the business school. And one of the things that we do is we visit Paris, Barcelona, and Madrid in the spring. And one of the places that I take my students to is Station F in Paris, which is one of the largest entrepreneurial hubs in Europe or maybe the world. And it's really a fantastic experience to go there and see it from a different perspective. What was interesting is when I brought my students there this last year, one of the folks that hosted us said, what we're really trying to do is replicate what you're doing. And I thought that that was really interesting. And that's like a really entrepreneurial and innovative mindset is what they're looking for. And doesn't come as natural, I think, to them just within their society and culture and their government. And we have more of this sort of environment here that is conducive to this. Although I would say that, probably in different areas of the country, it's more conducive than others. And I say in Detroit, we're trying to build this ecosystem as well.
So let's talk about that. I think when folks hear about Detroit and these conversations I've been having, I've actually gotten feedback from folks about places like Wayne State. And they're pleasantly surprised. They're always pleasantly surprised when they visit Detroit or they meet people who got their law degree from Wayne State or their business degree from Wayne State. And I'm also, again, stalking Kevin and his work. I know that your students and the case competitions they do when it comes to global supply chain, that they rock it. They do really, really well. Talk to me about Wayne State and talk to me about, I kind of call it a sleeper school because it's in the heart of Detroit proper. You have access to all these engineers and technologies and automotive companies and now fintech. What is it like for you to be a pioneer in majors and programs, but also being an educator in Detroit and giving these kids this global type of opportunity, whether it's travel or programs that you work on? What do you think would surprise people when they hear about the programming and the work that you do and that it's at Wayne State in Detroit?
So we're trying to really encourage that innovation mindset so that we can replicate what's happening at other universities around the country, like maybe on the West Coast or the East Coast or something like that. And so we're building a program that encourages multidisciplinary cooperation. So I'd really love to see business school students partnering with students from engineering and computer science and medicine and chemistry and music and art and coming together. And I'd like them to have those conversations in those cafes where they're thinking about new ideas and new applications and new ways to solve old problems. And so we do that first by our pitch competition. So we run a technology pitch competition. We offer an investment in these student companies and we do it for Wayne State University students. This year we have 17 teams and it
Wow.
runs the gamut. Biomedical engineering, business applications, all kinds of really, really cool stuff. And I've noticed this year compared to last year, we have more students that are interacting with each other. So I try to force feed them to talk to each other. So we hold events and say, hey, listen, I want you guys to all meet each other, talk to each other. I ask them to all introduce themselves to each other. And when they sign up for the interest forum, I email them everybody's contact information, and I want them talking and incubating good ideas, because I think when you talk about the longevity of a region and its ability to thrive, I
Mhm.
think one of the key components really has to be our students and our young people, because and the ones who are at university, they have real potential because they're doing really cool stuff. They're learning really cool things like in the sciences, technology. They're figuring out business applications and how to create solutions. And we need those students to stay here. And for those students who have that really innovative mindset, and they'd like to choose a career path that doesn't include like that the corporate career path, but
Mhm.
they want to do their own thing. We need to let them know that they can do it here and that they feel supported. So I try to recruit from high schools to let them know that this option is available. We have all kinds of programming here at the business school that I offer to all the students at the university that says, here's what it looks like from a founder's perspective. Here's what it looks like from a funding perspective. And I try to have them all network, not just inside the university, but outside the university, so that when they have those ideas and when they're percolating them, when they're doing that science and the technology and they come up with those ideas, when they leave this place, they know that, hey, I can do this. I can do it here in Detroit, and I don't have to move somewhere else to get this done. I can do it right here. And so that's what we're trying to do is integrate these students into the ecosystem so that they feel that they're prepared. So as an example, we have last year we had our first technology pitch competition. It was won by two students that are in our medical school, and they identified a protein that can be used to detect colon cancer
Hmm.
through a urine test. And it's really you know, a profound idea. And so they won a Detroit startup grant afterwards, a Venture 313 grant as well. And they're working on lab space to be able to test what they're doing. We need those types of students to stay here. And so we're so excited about what they did is that we broke it out into, we increased the investments we would make in these student companies. And we said, let's have a science and life science track, and let's have a business and consumer tech track so that we can really pursue both of these types of ideas. And I'm really excited because right now we're going through the process with our current batch of submissions, and we're judging them right now, the first round, and we're getting ready to have the finals here in the end of March.
I like that too when you said that you put them in different tracks because I am an information sponge and just like to know how things work and how things have been. And I was at a vibe coding night that Tech Town had, and I met some amazing students from Wayne State. Actually, one of the winners of my cohort, her app was one of the ones that won. We were using Lovable, and I love that there's different tracks and the recognition of we'd love to keep people here. Of course, you're not going to force people to stay in Michigan if they don't want to, but it's encouraging to see so many opportunities for students. If you wanna stay and pursue something, you've got that support. You don't have to go necessarily, and the fact that you're saying it's not just biotech, it's not just fintech. There's other verticals of an idea that can start from something that doesn't always have to be, the hard tech. I think that's encouraging. And I do think it's an advantage that people are starting to realize, like, as you know, I've got 2 kids of my own, and when I think about their collegiate path with, AI is here and it's not going away and things will be more efficient. I know Kevin and I share a love of EVs as well. Pragmatic, meaning, look, both kids, do what you got to do what you want to do, but you got to pick something or go to school, in my opinion, some place where you can have a vocation when that's over. Whether trade school is over, if you want to be an apprentice, or if you go to a university, it would make sense to go to a university, even physically. What they're saying today with the jobs that are changing with hiring, more companies today, Kevin, as you know, are not paying for relocation packages. So students have to also be strategic with where they're going to school physically to have the industry around that university, whether it's undergrad or grad, to get a gig. another reason why I love what you guys are doing at the School of Business there, the Mike Gillett School of Business, is preparing these kids. But there's so many built-in relationships with all these companies to job shadow or visit. I think it's fantastic. And I think more and more parents I talk to are like, oh, huh, Wayne State, it's right there. So what you're saying is really hitting a nerve with me when it comes to something's right in your backyard and offers the global experience for innovation, for ideation. You could still be, let's put it this way, when I've left Detroit in my early 20s to go to Chicago, I don't know. But if you choose not to leave, you can still have your home base here and travel, see friends, still do your thing as a young 20 something to see the world, but have a great occupation here in Michigan. I think that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do here from an entrepreneurship perspective. We want to give those students that opportunity as well. So not every student probably wants to be an entrepreneur, and it's for a certain type of student that wants to go down that path. And so what we did is we introduced a minor in entrepreneurship last year. It was a pretty warm reception from students. And this coming fall, we're going to offer a major in entrepreneurship. And the reason we wanted to do that is so that students could have a focus on the entrepreneurial ecosystem and understanding this growth and innovation mindset. It's a little bit different than if you are planning a corporate career. So we want to expose them to the community, the entrepreneurial community. So as an example, I have a seat over at New Lab. I have a seat at Tech Town. We have a lot of entrepreneurial spaces here where there's a lot of founders that are getting together and they're sharing ideas. And, I bring students to each one. So, as an example, we've had a program at New Lab. We brought students over there and we've toured them around. Same thing at Tech Town. And we want them to be familiar with this and have these experiences. Another thing that we do is something called a Warrior Consulting Group here at the business school. And I'm an advisor for this. And we placed, last year, I think we placed about 60 students at New Lab. And this semester, we placed about 47. And what they're doing is they're working with startups. So, working on projects.
Hmm.
And so we're giving students all kinds of different experiences. Here, meet founders, work with founders. The judges for our pitch competition are founders and venture capitalists. And so go and meet them and talk to them and get feedback. We're going to be starting a mentorship program. We have an informal mentorship program right now where
Hmm.
I match students with, founders and folks in the industry that, these students who are interested in entrepreneurship. We're going to formalize this over the next 6 months to really, really connect them. So just like in a traditional business school program that that marketing internship
Hmm.
or a finance internship, we want our students to do the same thing but have these experiences within the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So basically when you graduate, these people already. You're
Yep.
already familiar with the resources that are available. Like if you have an idea, there's someone that you can talk to. There's people that can already give you guidance outside of the university. Because I know that we're not going to build any unicorns while they're students here. It's going to take time, and they have to develop, and they have to continue to network, and they have to continue to build their ideas. And it's not always the first idea that launches someone in the stratosphere. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's your first idea and your second idea or your third idea, and sometimes you have to build that experience. But that's what the path is, and that's what we're trying to build here.
And I know that from what I'm gathering too, and first, congrats, because I don't know if you all caught that. What Kevin's talking about is now a formal major that got approved by the Board of Governors to take place at Wayne State. Entrepreneurship innovation was taught, but now it's going to be an actual major. And I think it's smart in the way you're approaching it because you've already included those entrepreneurial elements to the thing, to the teachings and the academics to see what works and what's needed. But now being able to formalize it, you've already had that set up. And I think that's smart. And again, another feather to the cap of offerings that kids can do here. So congratulations. I think that's fine. Just to have it seems like it's just been this bubble, good bubble of growth in a really steady way of adding layers to efficiency. So kudos. I want to switch gears a bit to the other side of your brain and your expertise because there is so much happening in the world right now when it comes to stuff. I'm talking about supplies, I'm talking about materials. And having gone at Western, I wasn't in that major, but I do know that I don't think it's called that anymore at Western. used to be called ISM, Integrated Supply Management. Pretty much it's supply side. I remember my ISM friends at Western, and I was so intrigued by that major. I was in the business school, but I was in advertising, but I was intrigued by that side. As a practitioner and an expert with what's going on in the world right now with tariffs and supplies and materials, what would you say to a parent or a student whose kid is interested in the supply chain side of things? Because we are a global economy. That's exciting to me. But what do you think has changed, or what should people look out for as they consider that type of major or even understanding when it comes to economics?
Well, we've had a lot of volatility in supply chains, global supply chains, both from, this current administration because of the way that trade policy has been, enacted,
Yeah.
which there's very little time. Normally, when you're negotiating trade agreements, they happen over like a decade or something like that. And we're enacting changes in trade policy like over the weekend. And so, that you combine that with what happened previously during COVID, and then you had some trade disruption that happened before that. But we've had a lot of disruption to global supply chains. And if anything, what it's done is made the students who are studying global supply chain understand how important they are to this process because they have to be nimble. They have to work quickly in order to maximize opportunity and for their companies. And what's also happened is the companies have been less willing to take risks. So risk profiles have adjusted. So probably back in 2017, 2018, risk profiles where companies were different, like and how lean that they wanted to run their operations. And now they have to think more in a mindset that the supply chain resilience is more important. That means they have to be able to adjust when things change and they have to be able to adjust quickly. So we've already seen that many of our automakers, as an example, have taken billions of dollars in additional costs as a result of tariffs that
Hmm.
they had not anticipated. And so they're having to adjust to that. What also is happening is when you have this volatility, is that what it does is it dulls or slows investment. Like companies don't want to do as much when they're not sure what the environment is going to look like and they don't know what their costs are going to be. So they tend to be more conservative. I think what companies are now in thinking is that we're going to have some volatility for a while. So we're just going to have to adjust. They still want to pursue opportunities. I think they're just going to be more careful. For anyone who wants to study in this area, it's fascinating. It's fascinating what's happening and the impacts around the world and the impacts on business. And there will always be, for a long time, there's going to be demand for supply chain students and graduates who can help them solve these problems and pursue opportunities.
Two things that stick out to me in what you said, and obviously, we are in Michigan. We are like technically the auto hub of the world. I have an ignorant question, but I have to ask a supply chain expert because I've wondered this for years. Aren't there efficiencies? I mean, would it be too much if, like, Mary Barra and Jim Farley, and I forgot the gentleman's name, the new head of Stellantis, if they got together from a supply chain perspective, like, okay, we all need steel. This sounds like a really funny question, but would there ever be a time where the big auto companies in Michigan got together? Hey, let's get a group deal on this steel or these parts or this electrical component for the baseboard. Does that happen, or is it still individual when it comes to how that works for the auto companies?
Well, there's probably competition is
Mhm.
driving them to try to seek their own advantages, and they also have to make sure they don't cross any regulatory, red lines as far as that goes, and the required competition. So, decide, some companies to work together to jointly produce programs,
Okay.
but sometimes they jointly produce and manufacture vehicles, and they'll probably work together like within those constraints to on some level. But I don't think they'll be wholesale where the three automakers are all combining, and it's because they have different interests, they have different vehicles and
Yeah.
designs, they might have different customers, and so I think there'll probably be some cooperation, but probably not on a large scale.
A girl can dream, and I mean, you're right, 'cause there's some IP that you don't wanna share, but I just maybe it's because I have this funny image of Farley and Barra with hard hats going to, a big steel area with, "All right, we'll take a couple tons of this and a couple tons of that." Here's the other side of supply chain I wanna ask you about, because this is intrigues the heck out of me. We won't go down the rabbit hole of are they good or bad, but data centers. I just whenever with the data centers coming on the docket with all these big buildings about to be constructed. I am fascinated by the supply chain side of it. I am fascinated by whenever this thing gets built, how many chips, where do the chips come from, the servers, like that. If I was a supply side student, that is intriguing as all heck to me with all the different components and how they come in here with which ones are based in the US, what comes internationally. Do you think that this onset of data center AI explosion is making the supply chain world even more interesting in general to study? Or is it just like pretty much like same thing be just different vertical, still supply side issues? What do you think of that?
This is we're going through a really transformative time where our economies, how we work, how we communicate, all of these things are going to go through drastic changes, I think, over the next 10, 15 years. And this
Mhm.
is part of it. And so supply chains are having to adjust. But, I think even what these technologies, when you think about AI and what jobs are going to be available, and you think about robotics, and you think about autonomous vehicles, like I just saw a video this morning of when you lift a pallet with a forklift,
Huh?
and the fork instead of the forklift, it's two long it looks like two long rods that go under the pallet, and they lift it up, and you don't need the forklift itself, just lifts them up and it can move it somewhere else in a warehouse. And so, when you think about the automation and AI and even the impacts on supply chains, like, we're going through this transition where certain products were important in the past and now they're not important at all. And so, and then we have, the minerals and materials that are very important that weren't important before. And now all of a sudden they're important. And then you combine that with the geopolitics and the competition that exists between the major superpowers and how they're jockeying for access to all these materials. The world is going through some really significant changes, not just in supply chains and geopolitics, but these technologies, like how we communicate, our relationships, like they're having impacts on our relationships. Like I would say that the cell phone has had an impact on relationships, like between parents and kids, and between spouses and people who are in a relationship, and like your employment and how you work. Massive, massive changes that are happening right now, and I think, like, if you go back even 10 years, 20 years ago, it'll be unrecognizable to people in 20 years.
You mentioned the minerals, that area too with AI and also EVs, the lithium batteries were having a moment, then it's other types of materials in the batteries, and then the range. All Let me re-ask that question one second because I think that came up on video. Hold on one second. One second. Hey, Nico, can you keep it down? Thank you. I had to move my spot upstairs because I typically do this in the downstairs basement
No
office.
problem.
Let me start over. Let me start over. B, note to self to edit that piece out. So let's talk about the minerals with you said things that weren't as important before now seem to be. Is there a whole other layer of even the how to obtain the thing? When we talk about minerals and talk about mining and getting those materials, is that something that you're noticing also becoming an issue in general?
Yeah, there's huge demand for these materials that go into batteries and sophisticated technologies. They definitely have control of this marketplace. And so in the United States, if we want to have independence, then we're going to have to develop these sources here within the US or within friendly countries. So we're dealing with the volatility of our geopolitics right now, with trying to define who are the friendly countries to begin with, and then to mine these rare earth elements here within the United States. There's
Mhm.
challenges too, because most of the time these elements aren't located in a place where nobody lives and works and plays, and we have to work out those issues. Like, is this a place where we want? because while batteries are, I have an electric vehicle, and it doesn't, spit out any pollution, but to create these batteries, it's pretty dirty. It's
Yeah.
localized, but which communities want to accept that waste that happens from that mining process? So all those things have to be sorted out. And so, we go from using one type of energy, and then, there are implications to that, and we gotta sort that out too. So yeah, these are big issues that need to be addressed, because there's only going to be increasing demand over time, and we're going to have to figure out how to source all this stuff.
Don't know how I haven't checked the status. I know that they are working on or we're working on an AV lane between Detroit and Ann Arbor. I think they're working on there was an effort to work on an autonomous vehicle lane between Detroit and Ann Arbor. Not sure when that's going to happen, but I have not stepped into, and I'm dying to go into a Waymo car. And I heard rumblings of, Waymo coming to Detroit soon. What do you think of the adaption that may or may not happen? Because we are like, we're Mota, we're the heart of cars. I just wonder, because I mean, I love the idea of being in a Waymo to give that a whirl. But how do you think the consumer in the Detroiter who's used to, big old engine, big old Ford Mustang might eventually adapt to or be open to an AV of sorts?
So I was just in Tempe, Arizona, and I brought students to um, a case competition, and they had
Hmm.
Waymo vehicles there. And when we first saw them, it was a little bit shocking. I had never seen them before. My students hadn't seen them before, and they basically have, I don't know, hundreds. I don't know how many, but hundreds of these vehicles that were driving all around and dropping off and picking up customers. It's like a car hailing service, but it's autonomous car hailing service. And I rode one myself, and I'll tell you that, after watching these for several days, driving all around and driving in one myself, I felt very safe getting into them. The vehicle, can look around, all
Wow.
around the vehicle. It will, never be surprised. I mean, it would be very difficult for the vehicle to be surprised by something that's approaching, and and they're coming to Detroit, so they're here right now. Actually, they're testing Waymo vehicles in Detroit. I see them often here by the business school. They're not the same that they had in Tempe. Like the Tempe ones, I think they were Jaguar. I think they were, or no, actually, I don't remember what kind of vehicle they were, but they have them here, and they're like boxy, like vans
Wow.
that are here. And my students really didn't want to even get in it. It was making them nervous. But by the end, I think they became very open to it, because they saw there's people getting in and out of these things all over the place. And these vehicles, very sophisticated. So, like, as an example, I was at a hotel, and I was curious, how is the car going to pull in when there's cars in the circle, and
Yeah.
how did you know, like, where to go? And it was able to figure it out. It went to a place where it avoided the other cars. It was a fire lane. It picked me up there and then took off. We were eating lunch, and we saw a Waymo vehicle, and it was pulling out of a drive, but the view that came from the right, the cars that were coming from the right, was blocked by a big truck. And so there were cars coming from the left. And so the Waymo vehicle wanted to turn left. What it did, we were watching it, it waited until the traffic cleared coming from the left, and it inched out, and then once it could see around the large truck,
Wow.
it out and it pulled into traffic. When I was in the vehicle as a passenger, we were on a road, we're going down the road, and there was a crosswalk. It's not a stop sign. It wasn't a
Hmm.
stop sign. It wasn't a light. It was one of those yellow crosswalk signs. And there were people standing in the crosswalk, and it saw the people. It stopped. It waited for them to cross, and then then it continued. Like, and I saw it. I watched it also when it was at intersection, and there are people crossing the intersection. It could detect the people in the intersection. It waits for them to cross, and then it goes. So I'll tell you, after being in that community for a while and watching it, I felt very safe. It was just like hailing an Uber or a Lyft. Although I'll tell you this, when you approach the vehicle, it has your initials on the top, like, so you can see it, so you know that that vehicle's for you. and it asks you to unlock the car with your phone so that nobody else can get in. So as you're
Wow.
approaching it, it sends you a message. It says, unlock your phone, you are not unlock the car. You can then get into the car, and then you have to press another button to tell it to go, and then it says welcome, and off you are. And it's just like Uber or Lyft. So what's
So you
going to
use it
happen?
you use an app just like you would same
Yeah,
okay, okay.
it's a Waymo app, and it's a Waymo app, and you will be able to use this here in Detroit sometime soon. So what they're doing is they're testing it for the winter elements here right
Yep.
now, and so they have people in them, just in case something happens. But they're giving it all of these miles and miles and miles of experience. So I would expect that sometime soon it's going to be available here as well. And so people from Detroit will become, you know, probably there'll be a lot of people. It's going to totally freak them out. I'm never going to get in one of those things.
I
But
can't
over
wait.
time, you're going to see more and more people like getting in. They're like getting a ride. And I'm imagining scenarios where someone would be interested. Like as an example, there's a big problem for Uber with respect to assault that happens on these vehicles and being afraid of assault, particularly for women being assaulted
Yeah,
in these vehicles. And wouldn't it make you feel a lot better if you didn't have to have that fear? And so you might be interested in a Waymo vehicle just because there's no driver. You could put a 14-year-old in a Waymo as well, so you can not have to again worry about
yeah.
having your kid ride with somebody else. If your young kid travel with someone else, you can do that. So there's all kinds of reasons for this, but I read a study that said something like 80 Waymo vehicles. They did a controlled study where they compared where the Waymo vehicles were driving, and they compared it to human drivers
Mhm.
on the same roads, the same type of roads, that kind of thing. And the Waymo vehicles were like 80 to 90% more safe than the human drivers. And the Waymo vehicles that did get into accidents, the reason they get into accidents is because a human driver hit them and wasn't as much the
That's
other way around.
that's I mean, if anybody from Waymo watches or listens to this from a marketing PR perspective, that's what I think they need to hammer that home because whenever AVs come up in my circle of conversations, very much no way. But I would think that it's safer. And if you remember when you hailed those Waymos in Tempe, was it cost wise similar to an Uber, or is the cost structure like based on how far you're going?
I think I only took one ride, so, and it seemed to be more expensive than Uber or a Lyft. But I would imagine that over time, I wouldn't think of my price as being the final price. I think that they're probably going to adjust that over time.
Yeah,
And, as the technology becomes ubiquitous, I think the price ultimately would come down.
got it.
And I think it probably would be very competitive. I would imagine a scenario where in the future, like, how much does it cost to buy a vehicle right now? You have a car payment of somewhere between 250 and $750. How
Mhm.
nice you want a car, and then you got to pay for gas, and you got to pay for insurance, and you could be looking at 1,000 or 1,200 bucks, $200 a month. And let's just say someone said, "Hey, $200 a month, you can get a subscription to a autonomous vehicle, and you just have to call it up, and you can go wherever you want within this radius,
Right.
as many times as you want, 200 or 250 bucks. That's significant savings. And if they can make these vehicles ubiquitous enough, it's a lot less than owning a car that sits in your driveway 90% of the time.
And my oldest, she's learning to drive now. She really doesn't have much interest to want to drive in general because we live in a like pseudo walking part area, but she's not really interested in driving. And I'm not in a rush to have her drive because to your point, and if anyone's driven, in the Detroit area, I've renamed the lodge the Autobahn. I mean, any expressway, but so many expressways, whether it's 94 or any place where you live, they could be crazy. I mean, it could be just too fast for my liking for a new driver to be driving. Kevin, we talked about the changes, what you're seeing in terms of progress with entrepreneurship innovation, letting students pick different ways of what entrepreneurship could mean to them if they want to do that outside of a corporate perspective. Or from a corporate perspective, there's this amazing, busy, looks like always going to be busy supply side vocation and way for someone to maybe think about their career. As we close out on this, I know that you're also a parent. What advice would you give parents of would be students post high school right now, as we look at the way in which tuition keeps changing? There is real fear right now with parents as to whether or not federal dollars will remain in different institutions, if certain programs will exist. And we're also finally seeing a resurgence in CTE, like, career technical education, like vocational training. What would you tell a parent right now with a kid about to finish high school with how education has changed and what you're seeing? What advice would you give them?
I think every kid is different and what interests them. There's a lot of options that students can have. Skilled trades are very good, and I think that you can have a really good career and a very good life in the skilled trades. I still think that university degree is a good deal, and I think the how do you protect yourself from changes that might happen in the future
Mhm,
by way of technologies or something along those lines. And I think the thinking careers where you are
mm,
managing people and you're managing ideas and you're managing processes and you're not just one piece of that. So developing this skill set. So there's a lot of you can go to a university and you can get a degree and you can get a get a piece of paper that you walk away with. I think that no matter where you go to school, that's not going to be worth very much. What you really should be going to school for is to learn how to really think in a critical way and be
mhm.
able to solve problems. And it doesn't matter what discipline or what field that you're in, solve problems and pursue opportunities and do this in such a way that you know how to you're developing leadership skills and you're networking and you're talking to other people and you're building up you're building your worldly experience so that you can make a good choice about what would make you happy and what kind of career do you want to pursue. So what I'm saying is that spending time at a university, it's much more important than just getting that piece of paper when you're
Yeah,
done. It's important to really engage. So talk to your professors, go to the networking events, go to the thought leadership programs, do an internship, and then. But I'll say this too: at Wayne State, we have a high percentage of students who have to work to support themselves through school, and so there are programs that try to support students who have to do both and do the best you can to take advantage of the resources that you have. And we try to make it so that students who have to work either part time or full time, we give them as many options as possible that they can take full advantage of the university experience.
that's really helpful. Thank you for that because you also mentioned a few beats ago in our conversation through your entrepreneurship innovation work. I love that you said that you get them to meet each other, to share ideas, to talk to one another. And I think that people forget whether, COVID did stifle a lot of that interaction and that socialization. I realized it's something I took for granted when I was coming up because we didn't know any different. But you also just said it's more than getting the piece of paper. You have to use those resources to, you know, shake a hand or make a phone call. I mean, even with our own kids, we're forcing them to call adults or apply for jobs. I'm not doing it for you. You order the pizza, you order the ice cream. I didn't think I'd have to do that, but it's interesting. You, as an educator and a thought leader, you also need to remind grad students to do that as well. That a piece of paper is great, but to get the gig that you want, you have to have that networking or understanding who's in the ecosystem in general. I think it's just great work that you all are doing. It's exciting that we have this in our backyard as an option. You know where I live, and I'm always talking to parents and high school counselors about the opportunities that Wayne State has. So I think that from us outside of a local stage, it really is starting to get interesting waves in circles outside of my own Michigander circle. So kudos to all the work that you've been doing to expand the reach. And I mean, shoot, you just got a new major approved. That's fantastic.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that, and enjoy what we do. And I work here with a great team at the business school and at the university. That it's a great mission to have, and we're trying to advance our students and advance the region too. And so it's a lot of fun. So I appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much.
Good deal. And good luck to all the people that you're judging right now, all the different competitions. If you have any other questions, I'll make sure I link Kevin's info in terms of the university and what he's doing within the School of Business. And Kevin, thank you so much.
Thanks, B. I really appreciate it. We'll see you around.
See ya.